Hello everyone, this is Mesbah Alam. I'm gonna do a very quick demonstration on how we can add third-party application tests that are based on Docker into our um, uh, test framework that we run in CI Adapt. The first step to start would be the third-party application that we're interested in. So let's say we are interested in adding Lucene Solar to our list of tests that we want to run. So a good place to start would be the Hub Docker website, where they have some descriptions about the Docker file that they're actually using to run Solar tests. So for example, this is a Docker file that typically gives you information about what we need to be installed in the Docker image for the Solar tests to run. And these are very useful information when we try to actually create a Docker image, a Docker file for our tests. So, so that gives us the basic background, and then we can directly jump into the workspace where we actually create third-party application tests. So the best place to start would be we have to be in the AdoptOpenJDK test repo, and if you check that out, you're going to see this folder called third-party containers, and underneath that we have an example. So the best place to start would be simply to make a copy of the example and start editing. So we can, let's say, and okay. So underneath the Lucene Solar test, if you look at it, we see this subfolder called Docker file, and inside that we have a Docker file, example Docker file already created, and we have a shell script. We're going to look into this later, and then we have the build script that actually builds the Docker image, and Redis that includes the command line for the test that actually eventually gets run in the build. So starting with the Docker file, so first thing we would want to do some renaming. So we can see that it has phrases like JDK example test. First thing we want to do is just replace example with Lucene Solar. So we can do find. Yeah. So this is a template comment. We can probably delete that. And then what we have here is the description of what SDK, Java SDK, that we are going to be running inside the Docker container. And we don't really have to change anything here. The default is OpenJDK 8, but this is a value that gets passed on from the build XML. We're going to find it there. So this is the from clause. This is where the image begins. It downloads the SDK and then installs necessary updates. So this is the set of necessary updates that we were already provided in the example. These are typically all that you're going to need. If you think that you need something else, you're going to find it out once you start the build. Another place to look for would also be the Docker file that you may find online for the particular third-party application that you're trying to run. But typically, this is the set that you're going to need. And then going down in the example, we have, so this is where it copies the shell script, and then we rename that to Solar, and so basically this copies it into your Docker image and then runs it. And this is the command that actually is used to git clone the third-party application. So for our case, we are going to be git cloning Lucene Solar, right? So what we do is we can just simply Google search it and find out the GitHub project for Lucene Solar, and copy that, and we can simply replace this part with that, and that will make sure that we are downloading. That's the renaming for the shell script. So now we're pretty much ready for with the Docker image. So going into the next file that we need to update, first we need to rename the file itself. Remember, we were referencing to this name from the Docker file. And what this file really does is it sets up Java inside your Docker image, and then it has the command line that you're going to run to compile and run the test that you've downloaded. And for our case, we are going to CD. So this is an example. It CDs into TCP example. You can basically CD into wherever you download your third-party application tests. So in this case, you see the work directory is actually the base directory itself, and then it downloads Lucene Solar in there. So for our case, we need to CD into Lucene Solar, because if you actually check it out, you're going to see that it creates a folder called Lucene Solar, and underneath it has its whole repository, which is this. So going back here, so we need to CD into there, and then we need to run a command line that I have figured out earlier, but it's going to be the command line that you use to run your Lucene Solar build script. And I'm just simply going to copy it for the sake of this presentation. But the idea is that we're going to have to figure out exactly what. So different third-party applications will have different ways, different scripts that it will provide to compile and run. For Lucene Solar, it just provides a build XML file, which is, you can see here, this is the build XML file that it comes up with different targets that we're going to use to compile and run. And you're going to see that what I'm running is a target called Nightly Smoke. That is a target that is available, of course, in this Ant script that allows us to run a kind of Lucene Solar test. There are different other kinds, but this is the shortest one. That's why I picked this for this example. I'm going to need to remove this. Not remove that. So compile and execute.
You already have.
Oh, okay. I'm going to do compile and execute. Solar tests. And then the build XML is Lucene Home. Lucene Home is a directory that is a variable that is going to be defined here. So again, for the sake of it, for this presentation, I had created this. So there are a couple of other environment variables and settings that you're going to need. For example, the Lucene Solar build requires a particular Ant version, which is Ant 1.10.2 for it to compile, and it also requires a certain version of IB to be installed. And these command lines can be obtained from the Lucene Solar website. They have detailed discussion on how to run this build. So basically what we need to do is to simply plug it into our Docker file, and that gives us all we need. So it gives us the Ant version and the IB version, and it also points to the Ant home, to the right Ant that it downloads, and that is what we use. It's just setting up details that we can probably use. So yeah, so we have the basic idea is you update the example example-test.sh and replace it with your shell script that you're going to need to run your third-party application. And then you come to the build script, and that needs to be updated. Pretty similar, so we need to replace example test with Lucene Solar. So now basically sets up some variables about the Docker image that it's going to build. So it's calling it AdoptOpenJDK to SimSolar, and it calls the Docker file, which is right here, and then it passes in a JVM version, which right now is hard-coded because this actually will be a variable that we're gonna add that variable later in the build. But this is used to determine the version of SDK that is going to be used inside the Docker image itself. So here it has a few targets. Clean image is going to clean up the image if you have built it before in the build, and build image is going to build it, and distribution image is going to distribute the image. And then playlist is where you also need to update. So it comes with some template comments describing what step needs to be taken on this particular file. Probably get rid of that. Basically, what it's going to do is we define the test target should be, let's say, something like that, because we're running the smooth test. And then we're going to have to replace this, of course, with the name of our image, and that's it. We are done. And then you have to remember this. Basically, this is the name of the test that is used by TestKitGen to generate the make target that we later on use in the build. So that's pretty much it. And then the way to test it is, of course, we need to check this in. I'm not going to check this in right now because it's just an example. And I already checked one in before. I can give you an example of that. So the way to run it is you go to in CI Jenkins, you go to the work in progress tab, and there we have a test personal build, and we can go there and we can point to our branch, whatever the branch is. For me, let's say the branch name I have is here, and then I'll point to work in my branch name and set up some targets, and then the test projects would be third-party containers tests, because that is the only test project that we want to build. We don't want to build the whole world. And we can use the name that we just put in here as name of our test target. So for our case, it can be this, and then followed by _0. And release can be nightly build, and then it's going to run. And for us, it will work because I had already checked in a version of what I've just shown you. It's going to build the images, and it's going to run the test. So that pretty much wraps up how we add a test. If there's any question, always at our blog or
To the Slack channel.
to the Slack channel.
Awesome. Thank you, Mesbah. That's great.